Today on Aussie Arvos, we're fixing my gearbox again. Welcome back to Aussie Arvos and welcome to another Workshop Masterclass brought to you by Patrolapart. Now today, we're going to go through not only servicing your car's automatic transmission, but also some of the intricate parts that make the automatic transmission work. So, why am I standing underneath my Patrol again? Well, I've been having some gear selection issues which I put down to the valve body. Now, to get to the valve body, you've got to first start by dropping off the automatic transmission pan, which we got into last night so that the car's had overnight to drain. So to remove the transmission pan, it's a basic process. You're going to go around the outside of the transmission. There's some 10mm head hex bolts around the outside of the pan. You're going to take them off. Now, I like to leave 2 at the front and 2 at the back while I undo the rest of them. And this is because that pan is full of ATF. There we go. Now, some of the newer boxes will have a drain plug on them. Mine is the earlier box, so it doesn't. If you do have a drain plug, it will be handy to drain it first. If you don't, it's a little bit messy, but it's not that bad.
There's the magnet.
No big chunks of metal.
Is there anything to look for when you drop it?
In the fluid, that's darker than it is, a lot darker than it is new already.
Yeah.
So the darkness you're seeing in ATF is from the clutch packs wearing.
Oh, of course.
Mostly.
Yeah, the dust.
So it's a wet clutch. Yeah. So yeah, imagine, it's like clutch dust, but
it mixes with
mixed
the fluid.
with. So the whole point of ATF, well, one of the main points of it, is that it's got detergent in it to break down all that, what would be dust that gathers on the clutch packs and disperse it through the oil or through the fluid so that the clutch packs stay clean.
Yeah.
Otherwise they clog up and they don't grip. So the magnet's got a little bit stuck to it, but that's pretty standard.
There's the valve body.
It is indeed the valve body.
It still amazes me how there's like wires and plugs and
Yeah,
stuff,
I
and it's
know.
just submerged in oil.
Yeah.
But, like, obviously,
It seems
oil's
so
like-
unnatural.
Yeah.
It's like, let's put electrical wires in the pan, in the oil, So, plan is, put that on the ground so it can drain overnight, and also so I can put the car down, so I can pop my rooftop tent, so I can sleep in it. Then in the morning I just crawl back under the car, keep working on it.
Yeah.
So, now that the car's had overnight to drain on the hoist, it's dripping slightly less ATF on my face while I go to work on it. Now, if you were doing this in a hurry, it's definitely something you could do straight away, but we'll take the chance we can to wear as little ATF as we can. Now, the first step to taking this valve body out is going to be to take this filter off. Now, this is both the pickup and the filter for this transmission.
What's the service interval for an auto?
It's a good question. I mean, the thing is, a lot of people, they tend to let them run. Like they just go, there's not many old cars you go to buy and the automatic transmission fluid doesn't smell like it's been in there for 100,000 Ks.
Yeah.
Every car's different. They'll all have different service intervals, like engine oil, but I'd probably do this, and people will say this is way too often, I'd probably do it at least every 20,000.
Okay, yeah, right.
But I'd probably 50. Do it, maybe 50. It just runs hot. I mean, you're a 4-speed with a 3-ton car. 33's on a massive tyre, but
yeah, it definitely makes a difference.
Consider it like a clutch, right? Like if you drive a car up the highway, you'll get 500,000 out of a clutch. But if you flog it in the bush every weekend, you might get 20,000 out of it.
Yeah.
So it's working harder when the car's moving slower or when it's under more load.
Slip, it's not locked up.
Yeah. I'd say look at your factory manual, but if you're using your car hard, definitely consider doing it sooner.
Yeah.
Because some of the intervals are insane.
Yeah.
So we've got those 4 bolts out. There's 5, including a little bracket over here. Now that's out. There's an O-ring at this front corner, which is where the pickup actually seals. Pops out like that, and you sort of got to wiggle it out on a bit of an angle. And that is your transmission's pickup and its filter. So if you look in the bottom, there's just a real fine mesh screen in there. And I've seen these where they've been left that long that that screen blocks up to the point that it splits or it breaks.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and basically
because it's just forcing transitions through the fluid.
There's no bypass for it, so the pump in the transmission's trying to pull oil that hard that it breaks that filter. So then you've got all the crap that was otherwise going in without
trapped
a filter,
in the filter,
and whatever the filter material is trying to get sucked into the auto. So the major problem with these, and it's a bit of a love-hate thing with having a drain plug on them. If they have a drain plug, people are more likely to just pull the drain plug and never take the pan off.
Yeah, not actually change the filter.
So it's like, pull the drain plug, put fresh fluid in it, done. This filter's still blocked. People forget that it's in there because it's internal to the box.
Yeah, just like be like servicing your engine and not changing the filters.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So you can get away with it for a bit, but you can also end up lunching your transmission because of it. So For the price of a service kit, which basically consists of a pan gasket, a new pan gasket, and that filter, and some ATF.
Yeah, it's pretty cheap.
It's pretty cheap insurance. So that's pretty basic service. So what we're going to do now goes beyond the basic service because I've been having an issue with it, which will be, we're going to start removing the valve body.
That just looks like a bunch of mess and spaghetti to me.
Yeah, there's a fair bit going on in them. They're pretty complex for what they do. It's one of the parts that I think people don't see on their car, so they don't know how complicated it is.
Yeah,
we'll get into that once we have it off the car, but yeah, they're pretty crazy bit of kit. So the first sort of few steps to getting the valve body out are going to be to disconnect this wiring loom, and then it splits off to these two wires here, which go to some solenoids that are on top. There's another solenoid over here, and then there's a temp sensor here. So you got to take all these wires off. They're just in little sort of fold over metal brackets. So you just unfold them gently, and then we'll start undoing some bolts.
Yeah, I could have sworn when I serviced my Ford Falcon Auto, it looked identical. Even the filter looked like it was the same shape.
Yeah, really.
Yeah.
They are quite similar, a
Yeah.
lot of them, in design.
In design, yeah.
And you got to remember, it's a Nissan box, but it's made by, I think it's Jatco, the company. So I don't know, I'm assuming they made gearboxes for a lot
For a
of
lot of
companies.
people, yeah.
So before we go too far in taking all the bolts out of the valve body, it is super handy if you can get your hands on a workshop manual for the gearbox. Now I managed to find one online that's the full 350 pages for this gearbox. So it does show here the bolts you have to take out to take the valve body off. Now there's a whole bunch of bolts in the bottom of it, but the valve body is basically in two halves. So a lot of the bolts in the center of it are holding the two halves together, and some other components on the top side of it that we'll get to once we have the valve body out. So you want to make sure you're not undoing all of them and setting things loose on the top side. So we'll follow this around the outer edge and we'll undo all the corresponding bolts to take the valve body out. Now it's also got, as I mentioned, it's got your letter symbols that correspond to lengths. So there's only two lengths here, which is pretty handy, 33 and 45 mil. And that is important when you go to put this back together. We'll pay some attention to that and know what bolts go where. Also, as I take them out, I like to try and keep the bolts in their little brackets. So it makes it a little bit easier when you go to put it back together that you know, okay, I'm certain that that bolt is the right length for that spot because the bracket only fits in one spot. And with that, we'll start taking some more bolts out. I've subbied out the work while I hold the paper.
In the manager's role.
Supervisor.
Supervisor.
I got oil on my hands, can't be supervisor. So it's quite tricky without the book knowing which bolt holds the which bolt holds the valve body to the gearbox and which bolts just hold the valve body together. So we're down to the last two bolts holding the valve body in now, which is going to be this one, and then the whole thing should, if we've got all the right ones, come out. Oh, look at that. How good am I at balancing some springs? Woohoo. All right. So now that we've got the valve body out, we can see a bit more of the inner workings of the gearbox. So there's a little bit going on here. We'll start from the front, make it a bit more easy to understand. So in this housing here, the bell housing, you've got your torque converter. Now that's bolted straight to the back of the flywheel or the flex plate, straight on the back of the motor. So that spins with the motor. In that, you've got an oil pump drive, which drives the oil pump, which supplies pressure to make this whole gearbox work. Everything in an automatic transmission is switched or loaded. The clutch packs for every gear are all engaged or disengaged by oil pressure. The torque converter also acts, like I said before, somewhat like a clutch. When you are off and on the pedal, it is what, as the name suggests, converts torque. So it converts the engine RPM into the gearbox RPM. And then that feeds into this rotating drum here. Now this is, there's a lot going on inside this as well. I'll find some old photos of when I rebuilt the gearbox, but essentially what you're looking at in here is there's a few sets of planetary gears and there's a few clutch packs. Now the clutch packs, I'd liken them to if anyone's ever dealt with a motorbike wet clutch, it's similar to that. So you basically got a clutch plate, steel plate, clutch plate, steel plate, clutch plate, steel plate, however many they need to make it strong enough. They are held apart by spring pressure, and when you want to engage that gear, the hydraulic pressure engages them, and it locks all the clutch packs together, and that's what drives your car forward. Now, depending on what gear you select, it's not necessarily that it gets one, it doesn't necessarily engage one clutch pack. It might engage, you know, this A and C, or B and D. So it depends on how the gearbox is set up as to what clutch pack it wants to engage to make which planetary set spin. So that is all housed within here. At the front, and you can see it, although you probably can't see what it is, this piece here is a band. See how that it's pushing out oil as I push it? That's loose at the moment. And this is a piston under here that actually engages that. So when you feed pressure into this piston, it tightens that band, and that again engages another gear. So all your automatic gearboxes are basically selecting gears based on a system of clutch packs and bands which lock down on the outside of a drum, sort of in the reverse of how a drum brake works.
Oh,
The friction material's on the outside, and it grabs the outside. The valve body is bolted to the bottom of this housing drilling you can see here. You've got obviously a lot of bolt holes, and then you've got a lot of these ports. These here are little accumulators, which means they float with those springs that are underneath them. They sort of float to hold pressure. So the gearbox supplies them pressure, and they act on the spring. And then these ports here, I can't tell you off the top of my head exactly which one does what. In supplying these ports pressure, you engage the clutch packs. So that gasket seals up to these, and that's what the valve body actually acts on. It's going, okay, I want to engage clutch pack A and clutch pack C.
Send oil down these
Send
ports.
oil to these ports, and that locks those two clutch packs.
Yeah, it's literally just comes down to there's always pressure there, and the solenoids just redirect where the pressure goes.
Yep. So the valve body I would consider the brains of the whole gearbox. Between it and the TCM, which is the computer that runs the valve body, they basically control everything that goes on in the gearbox. Now, in your older gearboxes, this, when I say older gearboxes, probably you're going, well, these people will be going, this is old. But this, as funny as it may seem, for its time, is a very modern gearbox, I think. I think it's ridiculous that they put a gearbox this electronic behind an engine with a carby on it. That's what I find funny. But you've got an electronically managed, so it's got a TCM that runs it, which is inside the car in the passenger footwell. A computer managing a gearbox. This gearbox also has variable line pressure, which means that depending on how much load it's under, it'll ramp the pressure that runs those clutch packs up and down, depending on how much load's on it. So more load means you need more clamping force on the clutch, so you put more pressure on it. Now, there's no point running full pressure when you're cruising along the highway because it's just loss of power. It's pressure to do nothing. So it minimises the line pressure. That is modern in itself, and it's got a lock-up clutch in the converter. Now what that basically does is takes the converter out of play completely. So the converter essentially has a lock-up clutch in front of it, and it basically overrides the converter. No matter how good you build a torque converter, there'll always be a little bit of loss through it. There's a little bit of slippage because it's only oil forcing oil. Imagine if you set up a fan in front of another fan and you blew air from this fan into that one, it's going to make this one spin. And that's basically what you're doing with oil, very basically, what you're doing with oil in a torque converter. So there's always going to be a little bit of loss there. So the clutch overrides that and gives it a direct drive from the engine to the gearbox.
And that's what they talk about when they say like they put a lock-up kit in their automatic. Yeah, and that gives it direct drive.
Now, they do a lock-up kit for these. The clutch pack in the front of that converter is about this big. It is tiny. The factory computer in this only allows that clutch pack to engage over 80 or 90 k's an hour and less than, I think, a quarter throttle. So it's a low load clutch pack.
Right,
now,
so that's just designed for when you're cruising on the freeway at 100.
Correct. So it gains efficiency, and it drops from around 2200 to 1800. So you are picking up.
So you can feel when it locks up.
It's almost like a 6 gear.
Yeah.
Almost. You can see the tacho drop. You won't notice as much in a new car because you've got more gears, so it's not under so much load. But that clutch pack is tiny, so something to consider. People putting in lock-up buttons. I'm not going to get into an argument whether it's for or against it. My mate that built the converter for me has built converters since, well, he's in his 70s now and he's done it forever. So I'd take his word for it. I asked him about putting a lock-up kit in it, and he said if you'd seen the size of the clutch pack in that, you wouldn't even be asking me.
Yeah.
So they're about that big. It's a ridiculously small clutch to think that it's driving this car. So if you're, people use them on hill descents and all that sort of thing, you're holding a lot on a very small clutch.
Yeah.
And when it lets go, you're pulling the gearbox out to get to it.
Yeah.
And you're paying someone to rebuild the converter. And
Yes.
They are good. And I think in modern cars, like, you talk about a 200 series or something, where you're towing maybe, probably not so much of a problem. The clutch in the converter is bigger. The gearbox has got more speeds. It's a lot less load. So that's my little rant on lock-up buttons. But that's the basics of what goes on inside one of these gearboxes. So hopefully that's covered most of that. Now we're going to move on to the valve body. We're going to chuck that one up on the bench and we'll show you what we're going to do with that. So if you're up to this point, you might be wondering, Dan, why are you taking the valve body out of your car? Well, as I mentioned earlier, I've been having some shifting issues. Now, what's been going on, and it's been going on for just over a year now, I'm not too proud to admit, and it's sort of one of those things that it was originally intermittent enough that I sort of thought, oh, I'll get to that at some point, but it has got progressively worse, as these things often do, and now what it's doing is it'll drop out of overdrive and it won't select third gear. So you're essentially in neutral, basically. It hasn't selected, as I was talking about, the clutch packs that engage the gears aren't engaging. So basically what will happen is you'll be driving along the highway, cruising along, and what used to happen originally is it'd only happen if you were in overdrive for a long time. So say you're sitting at 110 for an hour. You know, first time it happened was on the way to Fraser actually, or heading up to Brisbane, because that was the longest trip the car had been on. Driving along the highway, go to shift out of overdrive, so you give it a bit more pedal to get up a hill or to overtake someone. It drops out of overdrive, so you notice the tacho jump up from about 1800, so it drops the lock-up clutch and shift down into third at the same time. Normally you'd see it go from 1800, very quickly it'd shift to about 2 grand, that's it dropping the lock-up clutch, and then immediately after that it'll downshift into third, which will hit about 3 grand or just over. When it's doing that now, it's dropping overdrive. If I kept my foot in the pedal, it'd redline. It'd just sit on the rev limiter and not accelerate. And then when it did select third, it'd probably sound terrible and do some damage to the gearbox. Eventually you'd probably be up for another gearbox rebuild. Now, I think what's happening is either one of these solenoids, which are responsible for, so these are what the computer controls on this valve body, and then those control the oil flow to a whole bunch of spool valves inside this valve body. So every one of these has a spool valve in this casting. I think there's about 18 of them. It's a ridiculous amount of spool valves, and they all shuttle to allow oil flow to go through all different paths to engage different clutch packs. Now, I think one of them might be sticking, which means it's not shifting. They have to physically slide to allow the oil to go through a different path, so loop out to a different port. If one of them's sticking, it will delay, it'll cause what I think I'm having. So I think it's not getting oil pressure to the clutch pack to engage gear. Now why I'm thinking that, if it was a problem with the clutch packs, like they were slipping, which can happen when the gearbox wears out, it would happen when it shifted up into third as well. Going from second into third, I can do that under full throttle and it'll grab third immediately. There's no hesitation, there's no slip, no delay, nothing. And by the same token, going flat out, throttle buried in third, it'll go all the way to the red line before it tries to shift up. So it's not, a problem with the clutch pack slipping, because going up from second to third, it's fine. So I think it's something to do with the spool sticking or a solenoid not working. So it was a decision for me of, do I get to this point, take this valve body out, strip this valve body down, and then try and repair it, try and work out what's wrong with it, which is hard because they're a steel spool in an aluminium housing. So if it has done any damage, it's not really much you can do about it anyway. You're basically up for a new, you can try and oversize a spool and machine it out, and it's a lot easier to get another valve body. So I've just gone and done that straight from the start. So if we move this one to the side, here we have a shiny new, freshly rebuilt by me, valve body. Now this was one of those things of perfect timing. I had been thinking about, I need to do this, I need to do the valve body in my car, it's going to keep being a problem. And I'm not sure if any of you saw the video where we originally took the gearbox out and I rebuilt it, we put it back in with James from Bayswater Auto Care. But he messaged me probably a few months ago now, completely out of the blue, and goes, "Hey mate, do you want a spare gearbox for your car?" I'm like, yes. It was just about the time I was looking for a valve body. So yeah, he had the car come in. The customer wanted a manual conversion, so he swapped the manual into it, he kept the gearbox, and then the customer didn't want the gearbox back obviously, so it became my gearbox. So grateful to the customer and to James, but now I have a valve body. So I was looking around to buy one second hand and do that anyway, so that's exactly what I've done. Now apparently the gearbox was driving fine in the car, the bloke just wanted a manual, so he swapped it out. I took the whole gearbox, I've taken this valve body out. Now I have taken this whole valve body apart. I've opened it up, I've had every single spool out of it, I've cleaned it all, refreshed everything, put it all back together. It's all, as far as I can tell, perfect. So they should be like for like, and it'll slot straight in and hopefully fix my problem. So in cleaning and servicing the valve body, it was basically a case of separating the two halves, so this section and this section. There's also a steel plate in the center, separator plate, which has a gasket either side of it. So they essentially split into two completely separate circuits. So imagine it's sort of, if you folded it in the center, you'd have a whole circuit. Now, inside the valve body, you've got, I think from memory, 18 or so spools. You've got 9 check balls. There's a spring check valve. There's a couple of little pilot filters. There's 5 solenoid valves that operate the whole thing based on the computer. And then on the top of it, you've got some accumulators that make it run as well. So there's a lot going on in this. That's why I'd say consider it the brains of the gearbox. Now, I never went to that extreme with the old valve body, and that was probably my mistake. I didn't have at the time a proper drawing of the valve body. I wasn't confident to take all these spools out because they're all slightly different. They all have different springs behind them. They all do different things. And it was hard to say, okay, I'll take the whole lot out, strip the whole thing, because I wasn't certain I'd be able to put it all back together again in the right way. So I did take it apart, just into 2 halves. Cleaned everything, cleaned all the circuits, but I didn't pull every individual spool out. Looking back, probably not the best decision, and I think that's why one of the spools might be sticking now, because when my gearbox originally let go, for those who haven't seen the video, the converter sheared some rivets. It was an aftermarket converter, and I don't know if it had been abused or what had happened to it, but it sheared some rivets, spun, and therefore that sent metal filings or shrapnel through the whole gearbox. As I said, the converter being part of, shares the same fluid, shares the same circuit, probably ended up back in this valve body. And these things are that fine that, like, if there's a piece of metal sitting in a spool valve, it will just jam and stick and cause all sorts of damage. Yeah, I may at some point open that up and actually find out what's wrong with it, but for a start, I'm going to put this fresh one in and we'll see if the problem goes away. If it does, then I'll know it was this.
What is a mini spool?
A spool?
Or spool valve? Is that what you call it?
You're thinking
Sorry,
of dips, mate.
mini spool. Sorry, my mistake. What is a spool valve?
It's hard to... So basically you're looking at a machined barrel or cylinder that has ports in certain positions.
Yep.
So, you know, port. And then, well, this is a spool right here. It's a very basic one. Right? This is the spool that your selector manually engages with.
Yeah.
This is very odd to have such big gaps between the ports. But for example, say you've got pressure line in here, and this port here selects a gear, right? At the moment, because this block's in the middle, they're separated, right?
Oh, yeah.
But when you move that across to there, it loops the 2 ports together.
Yeah, so pretty simple.
That's the most basic way I can
So
explain.
they don't need to seal via like O-rings and stuff?
No. So that's the thing. So when I say they're fine, you can imagine this is a steel or a hardened steel spool in an aluminium housing. Right. So if any sort of grit or metal or anything floats in there, and this thing's trying to do that, it's just going to gouge chunks out of the aluminium housing. When I say I got a new valve body, even if I took this one apart and went, oh yeah, that spool's worn, what are you going to do about it then?
Yeah, the casting's ruined.
The casting's ruined. You're not going to machine it.
Yeah.
You know, if this was some, you know, there's none left in the world type thing.
Yeah.
I mean, the sky's the limit. You can oversize a spool and machine the barrel out a bit. But like, where do you draw the line on just getting one that works?
Yeah.
The other option is there is a lot of mobs that will aftermarket modify valve bodies. So there are companies that will sell valve bodies modified. So like you usually core deposit, you send them your old one and they send you back a new one, and they'll do all sorts of things. They can fully manualize them. They can do porting to improve the cooling flow and make the gearbox run cooler and all sorts of stuff. For me, it was just a case of, let's get the thing working again. So it's important before you bolt the valve body in to remember to put these accumulator springs back on top of it. If you remember when we took it out, they're the ones to try and fall out when you take it out. Now I'm using, because I had 2 sets here, I'm using the ones that went with this valve body, so they were out of the other gearbox, although they're the same springs anyway. Now I've just been through in the book, in the workshop manual, and double checked or cross-referenced these. They are the same as how they came out, but it gives you a free height for each spring. So you measure that and it tells you where they sit. Now the best way to get these, from what I've gathered, to get them into the box, it was a lot easier when I did it on the bench and the gearbox was upside down, but I don't want to take the gearbox out and I don't want to flip my car over to do it. So the best way to get these to stick, we'll just put a little bit of Vaseline or grease on the face there, and it will hopefully get those springs to sit there nicely enough that when I'm locating it up into the gearbox, it'll make life a bit easier, and they should stay where I put them. A couple of things to check. One, now being that I've rebuilt this, it's not a problem, but this gasket around the outer edge here. Now there's 2 gaskets with a metal plate between them. The top one's going to be the only one that really applies to you. If you have taken a valve body out, this is the only time I've ever taken one out, and probably because the car hasn't done that many Ks since it went in, that this gasket's all come off as one piece. Normally, like when I took this one out of the gearbox, it was in, it all crumbles to pieces. Now that's annoying because it is one gasket through the whole unit, so you have to split the valve body to change the gasket anyway. But that's brand new, so obviously make sure that gasket is undamaged. The other part is, being that the gasket does strip into pieces, check the mounting face on the underside of the gearbox, the mounting face that we spoke about before, and make sure that none of the old gasket is stuck to it. Obviously if you've got chunks of old gasket, you're going to have problems with sealing. It is a very fine gasket, so be very careful around that and make sure everything's super clean, and we'll go ahead and put the valve body back in. Most tense part of the whole operation. Don't drop the baby.
Oh, okay, that's lined up. Yep.
All right.
Happy with that.
Yeah. You want to start those bolts up. They can be a bit tricky because you've already got 2 layers and a metal plate in the middle, so if they're slightly off it. Yeah. Beautiful. Just.
All right, stick the pan back on.
Those 2 should hold it, yeah? At least till I get out the driveway.
Doesn't need a filter or a pickup.
Yeah. Well, if you put the filter in, it just blocks up, so, you know.
Now you got to remember where all of these different clips and bolts go.
It's sort of straightforward and not at the same time. Like you could do it without this, but it's just that little bit trickier of going, have I got that in the right spot? It's nice to just have something to reference against and go, yes,
Yeah.
that's definitely in the right spot. All right, so we've gone around and torqued up all the bolts holding the valve body to the bottom of the gearbox. Now, as we said, went around, made sure we put the right bolts in the right holes according to the manual, and torqued them all up. The spec is 7 to 9 Newton meters, so I went 9 Newton meters. So they're all torqued up, that's all ready to go. The next step was to run all the little wiring loom. Again, being pretty, it's a bit fiddly, but I try and be pretty delicate with it. The old wires can be quite brittle, being that they've been in like 100-degree oil for their entire life. So gently put all the wires back in place, put all the plugs back in, got everything working there. The next step is going to be to install the new filter. So we swung past Patrolapart on the way here yesterday, Arvo, and picked up a service kit for the auto. Now this is the filter, as you can see, like for like as the one I took off anyway. And the service kit also comes with a new gasket. Now the old one on mine was a cork gasket, but the new one is a rubber gasket, so that's a bonus again. That's going to make it a bit easier to install. So something that's important to note when you are installing the new filter, it does come with a new O-ring, so make sure to install that onto the filler neck. If you don't, you'll probably find when you start the car you won't have nothing will happen, because that has to seal this pickup in order for the gearbox to suck oil and therefore make everything work. So yeah, that's important. I have just put a bit of rubber grease or Vaseline on an O-ring. You can put ATF on it just to make it pop in a bit easier. And again, we're going to have to sort of slide it around under this little clamp here and then in. Alright, so with the filter all bolted up, we're ready to go ahead and chuck the pan back on. Now this is simply a case of I've been over, cleaned the pan. Now there's a little tiny bit of like silt in here, nothing metallic. If you've got very fine metallic sort of paste, probably not so much of a problem, but if there's anything bigger, an auto is a fair bit more delicate, I'd say, than a manual. So if you're looking at any bigger metal chunks like that you can visibly see or feel, start considering the state of your automatic transmission. But basically the only parts that are going to wear in here metallically are your gear sets themselves, bearings, that sort of thing, because all the clutch packs are this friction material, and that's what gives it this sort of, I'd say almost like a carbony paste. There's a little bit sitting on top of the filter here. It's this grey sort of paste. That's the ATF doing its job, taking that off the clutch packs as they wear and washing it out. But yeah, you get a little bit of that in the system, and if there's anything metallic, it'll stick to this magnet. So take the magnet off. It's only magnetized to the sump, so it just lifts off. Clean the magnet, clean inside the pan. I've gone around, it's just brake clean, and brake cleaned the edge of the pan here, and do the same on the bottom face where it mounts up to. And we'll go ahead and chuck our new gasket on, face it up to the bottom of the gearbox and bolt everything up. Alright, I've always found with anything like this, the easiest way to start is obviously to hold the pan up and to get one bolt in one corner, then usually go to the opposite corner. By the time you get 4 bolts in, it's obviously safe to sit there now. Then it's just a case of going around, putting the rest of the bolts in. While I do it, you can sort of make sure by looking in the bolt holes that the gasket hasn't moved out, because it's got such long sides and there's nothing to locate it till the bolts are in, it can just sort of fall in. Just checking the bolt holes that the gasket's still all lined up. I'll just nip them up and then I will go around and torque them up. Now, probably don't need to torque this to a very particular spec, but I find it's quite hard to get them all very even when you're just doing it by hand, and I have a tendency to over tighten things. I'll set my torque wrench real low, like 3 Newton meters or something ridiculously low, and then just go around and nip them all up evenly. In doing that, sort of cross over, you know, left to right, don't just do all one side. We'll cross it over the whole way, get everything done up, and then it's a case of put the car down, fill it with ATF, and hopefully I have 4 gears. What you'll notice with an auto transmission is we've put about 6 litres in that so far. You'll notice that when the car's not running, if you check it, it'll be way above the marks. So these aren't designed to be checked when the car's sitting here. They're designed to be checked usually running in park or running in neutral. So get the car started, get it idling, and then yeah, you've actually got, if you look on the dipstick closely, you've got a hot, there'll be a sort of crosshatch section for hot, which is right there, and there'll be on the other side, there's a crosshatch section for cold. Because these things run so hot, as I was saying before, thermal expansion and everything moves, and the height in the transmission comes up. So depending on whether you've just started it or whether you've just pulled up from driving down the highway, you want to make sure you're looking at the right scale. So we've got about 6 litres in the car so far. We're going to start it up, get it idling, and yeah, we'll recheck this and see where it's sitting. So you'll notice I've still got the car on the hoist. Now, I doubt there's anything that could happen this bad, but it's a good safety idea that if you are going to start a car, you've just done a major change to a transmission like this, either have the driving wheels jacked, or at least make sure your mates aren't standing in front of it or behind it when you do, because for whatever reason, if a linkage or a connector or something was out of place, this thing could select drive or reverse. Look, realistically, you probably turn the key off before anything happens, but let's be safe. And yeah, we've got the car off the ground, so worst case, the wheels start turning. Carby things.
I love how much of like a nuisance it is to start running.
It's perfect. Carby activities. The best fuel system there is.
Someone once told me that gas is only good for 2 things though.
Yeah.
Cooking snags and cooking heads.
I did. I've been quoted as saying that once in my life. Cooking snags and cooking heads. That's what LPG's for. This car changed my mind.
That's a sticker.
Temporarily. Yeah, that's a sticker, yeah. All right, let's see if we've got gears. Now, an important thing to note, if you are going to do this, and it's an easy mistake to make, but it sounds dumb. You've got your car, you've got the back wheels on jack stands. You're going to put it in drive, see if the wheels turn forward. Then you're going to put it in neutral, and what are we going to do before we put it in reverse?
Brake.
Brake, to make sure the wheels stop. Because although your car is not moving, it's very easy to forget that the back wheels are still rolling. It's very easy to slam it into reverse.
I think I did that once in the Falcon on the hoist.
Yeah, it's not very good for them.
No.
All right, we'll go reverse first because
it spins.
It's going the right direction. All right, stopping, neutral, drive, spinning forward. We'll see if it upshifts.
What speed is he doing? Oh, he's doing 100k an hour.
And we'll let it wind back down.
Oh well.
All right. Well, we have first, second, and third. I didn't get into overdrive yet, but
yeah,
I didn't really want to hold it there for that long either.
That's fair. So now, do you check the level while it's in park? You said.
Yeah. So we'll put it in park. You can check it in park or neutral usually.
Oh, yeah.
Again, check your owner's manual to see what that says, but usually park or neutral. And yeah, make sure, as I said, you're looking at. We'll probably still be looking at the cold mark at this point.
Is it bad that I kind of want a TB42? Is that a bad thing? I don't know why. It just seemed better than TD.
Do you want to? Oh wow!
I don't know.
Wow!
I'm gonna get grilled for saying that.
First he turns his back on the leaf spring boys. Now the TD guys are going to hate him too.
Needs
so
more.
It's down about here, which is quite low.
All right. Well, another litre. Do you think?
Yeah, I'd say another litre at least.
Oh, that's probably pretty.
We're pretty on the money.
I reckon it's probably there. Oh, it's moving under its own steam. That's a start.
That's a good start, yeah. The gearbox hasn't fallen out, so I can't have done that bad.
We've got forwards and backwards.
We have both. Great success.
Oh, rolling in luxury today.
Yeah. Check it. All right, so fluid's good. Topped it up. It took about, what, 8 litres in the end.
Yeah,
Just coincidentally,
as the manual
what the
suggested.
book said.
Yeah.
Funnily enough. It's happy it's on the cold mark, and I guess the next step is test drive it.
Yeah. See if we can get up the driveway.
Oh, come on, mate. Have faith. Give it a bit of pep. See how it holds. So far, so good. We have all the gear. Well, we have first, second, and third.
This car's definitely quicker than mine.
I'm glad I had the camera going for that one.
When I say definitely,
It's
like,
recorded.
I reckon it would be.
Patrick, I
don't
want
know.
a cut of that. No, remember we raced it at the King Pro Invitational?
Oh yeah, but I was a ute back then. In my car's current form, it wouldn't be.
Oh,
Like, that was when I was bare trade.
Yeah, true.
Yeah, with the canopy and
Oh, with the
stuff.
canopy, probably not, yeah.
nah. Give it a bit of stick.
I am giving it all the stick.
This is like the Nürburgring, but in St Andrews.
Nürburgring. Hey,
Was that though?
that's third. No.
Third or?
Yeah, that's third, yeah. I doubt we'll have the room to get into overdrive around here.
Probably not.
That's overdrive, but not lock-up clutch.
How do you know when it's in lockup? Oh, it'll just drop revs.
Yes. Oh, no, I spoke too soon.
Oh,
That's
there you
lock-up
go.
clutch. All right.
It's done it at 90k.
And it shifted out of it. Look, without dropping a gear. Well, that's a good start.
Yeah.
First shift, success. All right, yep, that's third, second, third, yep. Well, that's immediately better.
Yeah.
Like I said before, it got progressively, it started off very occasionally doing it, and then like on the way here, I was like, I'm so glad I'm going to do this, because it was like consistently, like you're scared to give it more throttle when you're in overdrive, because you're like, I know it's going to do it. Yep, that's
There you go.
overdrive.
So that's lockup.
Yep, so that's lock up. So see, it's like not even 1800 right now. And then if I give it some pepperoni, beautiful. All right, well, success so far.
So that's problem fixed.
Yeah, hopefully.
Alright. Oh, yeah.
Hopefully it's not just like one of the rare occasions where it's all happy, but it seems good so far.
That's what we like
And
to
it
hear.
seems to be shifting down a lot snappier than it ever did, to be honest. Like it's a lot more responsive.
Yeah.
So whether it's always had a delay in it and I just thought that was normal and then it's got progressively worse, you know what I mean? Yeah. Happy days.
I think that deserves a celebratory beer at the pub.
Yeah. Oh, it's like way quicker dropping into overdrive too. Like just then it's just like bang, bang. Because normally it was like, it seems a lot more responsive all the time, if I'm honest. So maybe like it was slow and then occasionally it's like really, really slow. I don't know if I'm noticing it more because I'm paying more attention or...
It's a placebo.
Yeah, it is.
Well, I've changed it, so it must be better.
Yeah, exactly. I spent effort on this, so I'm going to tell myself it's better. All right, guys, so that's everything back together, and as you've just seen, tested. So we managed to get it into overdrive a couple of times and back out. It's shifting perfectly. I'm actually stoked. It's going from overdrive back into third really well, but it almost seems like it's going from third into overdrive a lot snappier too. So I think it might be one of them things where I was sort of used to it the way it was before, but and obviously you notice the major problem it had, but it might have never been shifting as quick as it's meant to. So it seems a lot quicker in shifting up, and also, yeah, you give it a bit more pedal, it's shift down immediately. So I'm stoked. It's done the trick. So yeah, that's about it for this episode, guys. Hope you've enjoyed it. Hope you've learned a thing or two. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you have, and we'll see you in the next one.